In the Bekaa Valley of Lebanon, at an altitude of about 1,150 meters above sea level, there is a stone platform that the Roman Empire, the greatest engineering civilization the ancient world produced, chose to build its largest temple complex on top of rather than replace. Think about what that means for a moment. The Romans were not a civilization that lacked ambition or capability. They built the Pantheon with its unreinforced concrete dome that remained the largest in the world for 13 centuries. They built aqueducts that carried water across hundreds of kilometers of mountain terrain. They built roads so well engineered that sections of them are still in use today. When the Romans decided to build the Temple of Jupiter at Baalbek, one of the grandest religious complexes in their entire empire, they had every resource, every engineering technique, and every organizational capability of the most powerful state in the Western world at their disposal. And they looked at the stone platform already standing on that Lebanese hilltop, and they decided they could not improve on it. They built around it. They built on top of it. But the foundation, the massive stone blocks that form the base of everything at Baalbek, those they left exactly as they found them, because even the Romans did not know who put them there. For how? The largest of those foundation stones, a block called the Trilithon, which consists of 3 stones set side by side in a single course, weighs, depending on which geological assessment you use, between 800 and 1,000 metric tons per block. Each one, 3 of them in a row, at a height of roughly 7 meters above the ground, fitted together with a precision that leaves gaps of only a few millimeters between them. And in the quarry about a kilometer away, there is a 4th stone, called the Stone of the Pregnant Woman, or Hajar al-Hibla in Arabic, that was never moved, never used, still lying in the bedrock where it was cut, weighing an estimated 1,650 metric tons. 1,650 tons. That is the weight of approximately 220 fully loaded African elephants. It is the heaviest worked stone ever identified in human history. And it was cut, shaped, and prepared for transport by a civilization we cannot identify, using methods we cannot explain, at a date we cannot determine with any confidence. This is Baalbek. And the deeper you look at it, the less comfortable the standard explanations become. Baalbek sits in the Bekaa Valley, the long fertile plain that runs between the Lebanon and anti-Lebanon mountain ranges, roughly 85 kilometers northeast of Beirut. The valley has been inhabited continuously for thousands of years. It sits on one of the main routes between the Mediterranean coast and the ancient cities of the Syrian interior, and its fertile soil and reliable water sources made it one of the most productive agricultural regions in the ancient Near East. The site itself has been occupied since at least the 3rd millennium BCE, and possibly much earlier. The layers of human activity here are so deep and so compressed by subsequent construction that the earliest phases of occupation are difficult to reach and study. What we know is that by the time the Phoenicians were the dominant culture in the region, somewhere around 2000 to 1000 BCE, Baalbek was already a significant religious site. The Phoenicians called it Baalbek, the city of Baal, named for their principal deity, and it was a place of major religious importance in the Levantine world long before Rome ever looked eastward. When Alexander the Great passed through the region in the 4th century BC, he renamed the site Heliopolis, the city of the sun, drawing a parallel with the great sun worship center of Egypt. And when Rome absorbed the region in 64 BCE under Pompey, they found a religious complex already standing at Baalbek and recognized it as a place of exceptional sacred significance. Over the following centuries, the Roman emperors, beginning with Augustus and continuing through Septimius Severus, invested enormous resources in transforming Baalbek into one of the grandest temple complexes in the Roman world. The result of that investment is still standing, or partially standing, today. The Temple of Jupiter at Baalbek was, in its completed form, the largest Roman temple ever built. Its columns, of which 6 remain standing, are 20 meters tall and nearly 2.5 meters in diameter, the largest Roman columns anywhere in the world. The Temple of Bacchus, which sits adjacent to it, is so well preserved that it remains one of the best examples of Roman religious architecture still visible. And beneath all of it, serving as the foundation for the entire complex, is the stone platform that the Romans did not build and could not explain. The western retaining wall of the Baalbek platform contains, at its base, the feature that has made this site famous among researchers interested in the limits of ancient engineering. Set into that wall, at a height of roughly 7 meters above the current ground level, is a course of 3 limestone blocks known collectively as the Trilithon, from the Greek for 3 stones. The dimensions of these blocks have been measured precisely by multiple research teams over the years, and the numbers are consistent. Each block is approximately 19 to 20 meters long, 4 meters high, and 3.5 meters deep. Their individual weights have been estimated through their volume and the density of the local limestone at between 800 and 1,000 metric tons each. Sitting in a row, fitted together with gaps measured in millimeters at height, as part of a wall that also contains other large stones above and below them, they are the heaviest stones ever deliberately placed in a construction project in the ancient world, and among the heaviest ever placed in any construction project in all of human history. To appreciate what this means in practical terms, it helps to have a point of comparison. The largest stones in the Great Pyramid of Giza, the granite blocks of the King's Chamber, weigh approximately 25 to 80 metric tons. The largest stones at Stonehenge weigh about 25 tons. The largest individual stone block used in any modern construction project, the base stone of the Tsar's Bell in Moscow, placed in the 18th century using the most advanced crane technology of the time, weighs approximately 200 tons. The Trilithon blocks are 5 times heavier than that. The precision of their placement makes the weight problem even more acute. These stones are not simply dropped into position, they are fitted. The contact surfaces between adjacent blocks are dressed flat to a tolerance of a few millimeters across contact areas measured in square meters. Achieving that kind of fit requires either precision pre-cutting to very exact specifications or the ability to make fine adjustments to the contact faces after the block is in position, and making fine adjustments to a 1,000-ton stone once it has been lifted to height is an engineering problem of a completely different order from simply moving the stone. And yet there they are, fitted, at height, in a wall, waiting for someone to explain them. About a kilometer to the southwest of the main temple complex, in an ancient quarry that supplied the limestone used throughout the Baalbek site, there is a stone that has become perhaps the most discussed single object in the entire debate about ancient engineering capability. It is called Hajar al-Hibla in Arabic, the stone of the pregnant woman, a name that comes from local folklore rather than any archaeological finding, and whose origin is somewhat obscure. What is not obscure is the stone's dimensions. It measures approximately 21 meters in length, 4 meters in height, and 4 meters in width. Its estimated weight, based on its dimensions and the density of the local limestone, is approximately 1,000 metric tons in its original assessments, but more recent analysis, including work published by German archaeologist Janine Abdul-Masih and colleagues, has revised that estimate upward to approximately 1,650 metric tons. The stone of the pregnant woman was never moved. It was cut from the bedrock. 3 sides are fully separated from the surrounding rock, the cutting completed, but it was never extracted and never transported to the construction site. It lies at a slight angle in its quarry bed, the lower face still attached to the bedrock below, as if the work was interrupted before the final separation was made. Why it was abandoned is not known. Whether the project was halted deliberately, whether the people who cut it ran out of time or resources, whether something went wrong in the cutting process, none of these questions have definitive answers. What the stone does tell us is the intended scale of the project. If the Trilithon blocks already placed in the wall weigh up to 1,000 tons each, and this stone, apparently intended for the same construction program, was cut to approximately 1,650 tons, then the builders were working at a scale of ambition that exceeds anything else in the ancient world. They were not at the upper limit of their capability when they placed the Trilithon. They were planning to go further. In 2014, a German archaeological team working at the quarry under the direction of Janine Abdul-Masih discovered a third large stone, partially buried beneath the quarry floor, that had not previously been documented. This stone, sometimes called the Stone of the Forgotten or simply the Third Stone, is estimated to weigh approximately 1,242 metric tons, making it heavier than the Trilithon blocks but lighter than the Stone of the Pregnant Woman. Its discovery confirmed that the quarry contained multiple examples of stones cut to this extraordinary scale, and that the Baalbek builders were consistently working at weights that no other ancient culture attempted. The central question that Baalbek poses to the history of ancient engineering is straightforward to state and enormously difficult to answer. How did whoever built the platform move and place stones of this weight using the technology available in the ancient world? The mainstream archaeological position is that the Trilithon blocks and the other large stones at Baalbek were moved and placed by the Romans as part of their construction of the temple complex, using advanced versions of the same techniques Romans used elsewhere: large teams of workers, wooden sleds, ramps, ropes, levers, and capstan winches. This is a coherent position, and it deserves serious engagement, because the Romans were genuinely remarkable engineers and their organizational capacity was extraordinary. The problem is the numbers. Roman engineering records, and the Romans were reasonably good record keepers, document the movement of large stones and obelisks from Egypt to Rome during the imperial period. The largest obelisk ever moved by Rome, the Lateran obelisk, weighs approximately 455 tons. Moving it from Egypt to Rome required a specially constructed ship, an enormous dedicated harbor facility at Rome, and an effort that was considered one of the great engineering achievements of the empire. Contemporary accounts describe the operation in terms that suggest it was at the absolute limit of Roman capability. The Trilithon blocks weigh roughly twice that. Experimental archaeology and engineering analysis have produced various estimates of what would be required to move a 1,000-ton stone using ancient technology. The consensus range tends to fall between 10,000 and 40,000 workers pulling in coordinated teams, depending on the terrain, the surface, and the specific mechanical arrangements used. The quarry is approximately 1 kilometer from the wall where the Trilithon blocks sit. The route between them involves a slight uphill gradient. Moving 3 blocks of this weight along that route, lifting them to a height of 7 meters, and fitting them in position with millimeter precision would have been, on any reasonable engineering analysis, one of the most demanding logistical operations in human history. And yet there is no Roman record of it. No inscription commemorating the achievement. No account in any contemporary document of how the platform was built or who built it. The Romans documented their major construction achievements, the Pantheon, Trajan's column, the aqueducts, in considerable detail. The Baalbek platform, if it was a Roman construction project, would have been the single most demanding stone-moving operation they ever undertook, and it left no record whatsoever. That silence is not proof that the Romans didn't do it. Absence of evidence is not evidence of absence, and ancient records are incomplete by definition. But it is a gap that the conventional explanation has to account for, and accounting for it is not straightforward. The dating question at Baalbek is more complex and more contested than most popular accounts suggest, and understanding it requires distinguishing between different phases of construction at the site, because not everything at Baalbek was built at the same time, by the same people, for the same purpose. The Roman construction phases are relatively well dated. The Temple of Jupiter was begun under Augustus in the late 1st century BCE and substantially completed under Nero in the 1st century CE. The Temple of Bacchus was built in the 2nd century CE, probably under Antoninus Pius. These dates are established through inscriptions, numismatic evidence, and comparison with other datable Roman construction. The Roman columns, the Roman decorative stonework, the Roman layout of the temple precinct, these are all securely dated to the Roman period. The platform is a different matter entirely. The Trilithon blocks are not Roman columns or Roman decorative stonework. They are raw limestone blocks without Roman dressing or decoration, incorporated into the base of the complex in a way that suggests they predate the Roman construction built on top of them. The Romans clearly used the platform as a foundation. There is no question about that. The question is whether they also built it. Archaeological investigation of the platform's construction sequence has been limited by the practical difficulty of excavating beneath a still-standing ancient monument, but the work that has been done suggests a complex history. German archaeologist Michael Heinzelmann, who led excavations at Baalbek for the German Archaeological Institute in the early 2000s, identified construction phases in the platform that appear to predate the Roman period, though the precise dating of those phases remains a subject of scholarly debate. Lebanese archaeologist Hürkan Kalayan, who did extensive work at the site in the mid-20th century, concluded that the Trilithon course represented a pre-Roman construction phase, though his specific dating proposals have been questioned. The honest position, which most serious researchers have settled into, is this: the Roman construction at Baalbek is well dated and well understood. The platform on which the Romans built is not well dated and not well understood. The two things are related. The Romans used the platform, but they are not the same thing, and conflating them produces a false confidence about what we actually know. What we can say with reasonable confidence is that the stones were cut from the local quarry, the geology matches, and the quarry evidence is unambiguous. What we cannot say with equivalent confidence is when they were cut, who cut them, or how they were moved and placed. And those are not minor details. They are the entire question. One of the most striking aspects of the Baalbek mystery is what the ancient sources, the Greek and Roman writers who documented the ancient world in considerable detail, do and do not say about it. Baalbek, under its Roman name Heliopolis, appears in ancient sources as a significant and impressive city. Macrobius, writing in the 5th century CE, described the temple of Jupiter at Heliopolis as one of the most magnificent temples in the world. The Emperor Trajan consulted the oracle there. Constantine the Great attempted to suppress its pagan cult in the 4th century, and the Emperor Julian tried to restore it. The site was clearly known and considered important throughout the Roman period. But none of these sources, not one of them, says anything about the construction of the platform or the origin of the large foundation stones. They describe the temples. They describe the oracle. They describe the religious practices. The stones themselves, despite being the most extraordinary physical feature of the entire complex, are simply not mentioned. No ancient writer says, "Here are the largest stones ever placed by human hands," or "These blocks were laid by such and such a king in such and such a year." The Trilithon is archaeologically unmissable. It is the defining feature of the site's physical reality, and yet it is historically invisible in the ancient record. This silence cuts in multiple directions. On one hand, it might suggest that the stones were so old by the time of the Roman writers that their origin was simply unknown, that the Romans themselves looked at the Trilithon and shrugged, the way tourists today look at it and shrug, because nobody knew who had put it there. On the other hand, it might reflect something more mundane. Ancient writers tended to describe religious and cultural significance, not engineering specifications, and a large stone in a foundation wall might simply not have been considered worth remarking on. What the silence does not provide is an answer. It leaves the question exactly where the physical evidence leaves it: open, contested, and more interesting than comfortable certainty would allow. Baalbek does not stand alone. It is part of a pattern, a series of sites around the ancient world where stones of extraordinary size and weight were moved, placed, and incorporated into constructions whose full history is not understood. At Sacsayhuaman in Peru, the fortress walls above Cusco contain stones weighing up to 360 metric tons, placed with the same kind of tight-fitting precision found at Baalbek by the Inca, a culture that also had no wheel and no iron tools. At Pumapunku in Bolivia, which we have covered on this channel, stones of up to 180 tons were cut with machine-like precision. At the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, the western wall contains foundation stones, the so-called master course, that weigh up to 600 tons. At the Great Pyramid of Giza, the total mass of stone moved is approximately 6 million tons, achieved through an organizational effort whose full details are still debated. The pattern these sites collectively suggest is that there were periods in ancient history, most of them poorly documented, some of them predating written records entirely, during which human societies were capable of moving and placing stone at a scale that we find difficult to explain using our conventional models of what ancient technology could achieve. Baalbek is the most extreme example of this pattern, but it is not an isolated anomaly. It sits within a global phenomenon that archaeology has not fully resolved. The conventional response to this pattern is to argue that each site can be explained individually through local ingenuity, large labor forces, and clever application of basic mechanical principles, levers, ramps, ropes, sleds. And that response is not unreasonable. Human ingenuity is genuinely extraordinary, and our assumptions about what ancient people could or could not do have been wrong before. Göbekli Tepe, which we covered in our last video, demonstrated that organized monumental construction was possible 12,000 years ago, millennia before the conventional timeline suggested. But the Baalbek stones sit at the extreme end of this argument. At 1,000 tons per block, the Trilithon is not simply a challenge to ancient engineering, it is a challenge to our understanding of what was physically possible with the organizational and mechanical resources available before the Industrial Age. And the stone of the pregnant woman at 1,650 tons was apparently intended to go further still. The Temple of Jupiter at Baalbek was built to honor the greatest god in the Roman pantheon, in a style designed to project the power and permanence of Rome across the centuries. The Romans succeeded. The 6 columns still standing at Baalbek are among the most impressive ancient ruins in the world, and they have stood for nearly 2,000 years through earthquakes, invasions, and the slow erosion of time. But the Romans built those columns on a foundation they did not create and could not fully explain. And that foundation, those 3 stones set side by side in a single course, each one weighing close to 1,000 tons, fitted together with a precision that shames most modern construction, is older than Rome, older than the written history of the Bekaa Valley, and in some fundamental sense older than our ability to account for it. Every serious researcher who has spent time at Baalbek comes away with the same experience. The Roman temple is impressive. The Trilithon is something else. Something that sits outside the comfortable categories of ancient history, that resists the usual explanations, that demands an accounting that our current models of the past cannot cleanly provide. In a quarry a kilometer away, a stone weighing 1,650 tons lies where it was cut, never moved, still waiting. Around it, the evidence of a construction program whose full ambition we are only beginning to understand. Above it, the columns of Rome, built by a civilization that looked at what was already there and decided they could not improve on it. The question of who put those stones in place, and when and how, is not a question that archaeology has answered. It is a question that Baalbek has been asking for longer than history can remember. And the stones are still waiting for a satisfying reply. This has been the Hidden History Vault. The vault is never truly empty.